Hey YouTube, welcome back to the workshop. This is John with Lone Tree Workshop, and I decided I wanted to build a Steampunk X-Wing from Star Wars. And I like to do it completely out of scrap, so everything you see here is all just crap and junk that I've collected over the years. Started off by marking up a 2x4 and just completely guesstimating dimensions and trimming it down to the basic shape. I wanted this X-Wing to be decent sized, something that could be on display and stand on its own and look pretty good on display. So it's going to end up being, I don't know, probably about 2 feet wide, 2 feet long, that sort of thing. So once I shaped all of the wood together, then I began to cut the wings out. I hot glued all 4 wings together, that way I could cut them all the exact same size on the bandsaw at the same time. And then I mortised out the slots where the wings would go into the body. And with rough assembly, got a basic shape. Decided to put a couple of screws in to hold the wings in place while I figured out what I was going to do next. So here comes all of the crap and junk I've collected over the years. And I had a bunch of sheets of old copper that people had thrown out, and figured it would look really cool if the entire X-Wing was wrapped in copper. For those of you who don't know, a standard blade on a table saw or a radial arm saw or a chop saw can cut through copper. It's a non-ferrous metal. It's pretty soft, and so you can just use a standard blade. So I began shaping the copper to wrap around the body of the X-Wing. And again, there's nothing precise here. I'm kind of making it up as I go along. I'm using that sheet of 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch steel as a straight edge to bend on. You can see I keep clamping the edges of the steel there to hold it. That way I can bend the copper with a little bit of force on it. Lining up the copper on the bottom of the X-Wing here, I decided I wanted a nice clean seam, so I'm going to use my grinding tool with a cutoff blade on it to cut through both layers. Then I marked it where I'm going to pre-drill, and so then using a punch I set a little divot so that the drill press can find and drill the holes out easily. And once all of the holes were drilled, I hammered them home with little brass nails. Home Depot actually carries all sorts of little decorative stuff like that, so I just picked up a bunch of brass nails and screws and that sort of thing. So using some other copper sheets that I had, I began to wrap the wings. Each wing I wrapped a little bit differently, using a little bit different pieces of copper. That way they all kind of looked a little different. I had a sheet of copper that was actually, for whatever reason, painted brown. You'll see that come up here in a little bit. But I wanted the whole thing to look like it had been, you know, just kind of put together haphazardly, almost, in a way. That there's a lot of seams, a lot of joints, a lot of handmade look to it, rather than it being, you know, factory produced. So this is the first of the 4 wings. The other 4 pretty much went the same way. There they all are real quick. And so now I'm just wrapping the rest of the body of the X-Wing. You can see it there in the foreground. Just making sure that everything will line up. Pre-drilling again for all of the holes. Now a little trick here is that once you've pre-drilled the first couple of holes, you can tack those in. That way it holds the metal where you want it to pre-drill the rest of it. That way it's nice and tight. Yeah, I'd love to say I can drill that fast. And there's the finished product. So I had to carve out where the wings are going to go through the metal. So I slotted those out. And again, no measurements, just kind of guessing, figuring it out as I go. But having a lot of fun doing it. I did label each of the wings there so that I was always putting the same wings back into the same slots. I noticed there on the side of the body, there's a little opening between the two wraps of metal. And so I thought, hey, that'd be kind of cool to put what looks like a little bit of a grill in there, or like an air intake. Even though an X-Wing flies through space, I guess an air intake would still be helpful and look cool. So I painted it black on the inside, that way when you look down inside of it, all you would see is the aluminum pieces there. And those are just heat extruders from a computer circuit board, so it lets off the heat. But you look down in there now and it looks actually pretty cool with what looks like little vents. So speaking of the computer circuitry and stuff like that, these are just old circuit boards I grabbed out of a recycle pile somewhere. And I'm just pulling off some more aluminum bits and some diodes and other resistors and that sort of thing. Just stuff that I think would be cool. And then what you don't see here is I end up stripping everything else off of it in order to actually use that plate without anything on it. And that is what I carve using my mounted bandsaw there. And I stick that on the back end of the body, and that's what I'm going to actually mount the couple of resistors and a couple of diodes and that sort of thing onto it to make it look like the engine parts on the back end of the X-Wing. So now I'm working on the wings and figuring out how to mount the engines onto them. I had 4 wheel pegs that a BMX bike would use, and so I figured these are all about the same size, even though it's kind of 2 pairs. And I just mounted them using standard bolts right up through the wing. But what I discovered very quickly was the bolts are kind of tight in the middle of the wing there, and so in order to get into them, it's actually easier to take the wings out and mount them after I get these first 2 on. You'll see that I take the wings off and start mounting the bottom ones onto it. And then put it back together. Now, to me, the big engines look great, but it kind of needed exhaust ports on the backside, and so using some brass fittings that I had found in a recycle bucket a long time ago, just mounted them on there and used some little copper pieces to fit in between so it looks like it was intentional. And then decided I wanted to mount some really cool cables that I had found the last time I was at the junkyard, and just kind of fished them through, fed them through different holes, connected them onto the back, soldered some of them together, and then figured, okay, maybe a couple of them could go into the engines, a couple of them could go out onto the wings. And so I drilled a couple holes and mounted some of them out onto the wings. I don't know if it's in the sense of that the copper somehow can collect power or diffuse the power or whatever. Either way, I just thought it would look kind of cool just spreading it out. When it comes to steampunk, you want everything to be somewhat organized but still have an element of organic layout to it. Couple other coils and that sort of thing that I had taken off of some of that computer circuitry and just started mounting stuff onto it. Typically an X-Wing has an R2 unit that sits in the back there and runs everything, and so I had this brass fitting that the head of it kind of looked like an older model of the R2 unit, so he's brass and steampunk himself, and so I mounted that on there. And then found a little piece of aluminum metal and a brass hinge in order to make the cockpit, and the cockpit can actually fold up and down. Once I had cut the aluminum there, the edges of it were actually kind of sharp, so I decided to crimp some copper tubing onto it. So I cut a copper tube in half, and then just using the pliers just crimped it on all the way around to give it a smooth edge all the way around. And I think it looks pretty cool. So now just cut some extra copper pipe. I didn't have any more of the matching brass fittings, but again, I like the mismatched organic look to it, and so just mounting those on as the lower exhaust ports. So now we're getting to the nose cone, and just a scrap piece of sheet metal that I had laying around. Realized there that I'm about to cut it out the wrong way, so no pattern, no super detailed measurements or anything like that. Just kind of guessing and planning it out. Using the steel bar to work as a brake and bend it. Just folded the tabs in and then folded it all up, kind of like a little bit of origami using metal there. And I was actually surprised. First try, it fit perfectly. I know that sounds like I'm bragging. I was just as surprised as anybody would have been. I thought for sure I was going to have to modify it like 17 times. So I used a couple little brass nails to keep the whole thing together. And I put a couple more of the vents on the inside of the nose cone there. And so this is an old fan belt that I found in a junkyard that had already broken. And so just kind of hammering that in there with some brass nails, or copper nails actually, just to run all the way up the front there. Just thought that looked kind of cool. So these rods are hollow, and what I did was I tapped the end of the rods, both ends of all 4 rods, and then what you're seeing there is I'm cutting off the bolts that have the wing nuts on them, and then I thread those in, tighten up the wing nuts nice and tight, and then I cut the heads off with bolts, and that's what gives me what looks like the, I don't know, laser cannons that are on the ends of the wings of the X-Wing. So once I had mounted all 4 of those, there was just a couple little detail things that I wanted to do, a couple little extra wires here and there, just some stuff on the side of the nose of the unit, but I was pretty happy with how the whole thing turned out, and so I decided to make a stand for it, which I didn't film. I wish I had, because I had a lot of fun making that, but this is the final product here. So I'll just give you some close-up shots of it. You can see some of those diodes and resistors and that sort of thing that I mounted on the side. Those coil springs are just a big giant long spring that I found in a junkyard once. There's the stand I was talking about, just modded together a whole bunch of junk and pieces and that sort of thing. And so the X-Wing can be sitting on an angle or can rotate, that sort of thing. And that way it can be positioned into whatever attack position or whatever you want it to be in. Had a lot of fun making this mod. If you're interested, or you want to tell me in the comments what you'd like to see me build next, I would love your suggestions. Thanks for watching. As always, hit the like and the subscribe. That's what will help me do more of these projects and do more creative stuff. If you're interested in ordering a model, hit me up. I would love to custom make an X-Wing or something from Star Wars or Firefly or whatever you think you would like to see hanging up on your wall or up on your shelf. Let me know, and I'd love to make it for you. As always, be creative, do your own stuff, have fun with it, and thanks for watching.